They say money talks, but sometimes it screams. It screams secrets so loud, they shatter everything you thought was real. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about the silent, insidious theft that can unravel a life, a business, and a soul. What you're about to hear is a chilling account of how the very foundation of my success was systematically hollowed out, and how the truth, when it finally surfaced, was far more devastating than any affair. Just wait until you hear the final cost. My name is Mark Donovan. For 20 years, I've built Donovan Enterprises from a small startup into a multi-million-dollar tech firm. I prided myself on my foresight, my meticulous planning, my ability to spot a flaw before it became a crisis. My business was my lifeblood, a testament to hard work and unwavering dedication. And alongside it, I built a life with my wife, Isabella. She was the elegant, charming counterpart to my driven ambition, the perfect hostess, the supportive partner. Our life was a well-oiled machine, every component seemingly in sync. We had the sprawling estate, the luxury cars, the philanthropic endeavors. I was the man who had it all, the self-made success story. I believed in transparency, in integrity, in the idea that a strong foundation could withstand any storm. Until the storm came from within, a silent, unseen erosion that threatened to collapse everything I had painstakingly constructed. The first signs were whispers, easily dismissed as the usual ebb and flow of a thriving business. A slight dip in quarterly profits, an unexpected increase in operational costs. I attributed it to market fluctuations, new competitors, the general unpredictability of the economy. But then the whispers grew louder. The monthly financial reports, once a source of pride, began to show anomalies. Larger than usual transfers to obscure accounts, vague entries for consulting fees that didn't quite add up. I'd question Isabella, who managed our joint business accounts and personal finances with an iron fist and a charming smile. She'd offer plausible explanations, new software licenses, unexpected vendor costs, a temporary market adjustment. Her answers were always smooth, confident, delivered with a reassuring squeeze of my hand. I trusted her implicitly. Why wouldn't I? She was my wife, my partner in everything. But the nagging feeling persisted, a tiny, persistent itch I couldn't quite scratch. It was like a faint, off-key note in a perfectly orchestrated symphony. Individually, each discrepancy was minor. Collectively, they began to form a dissonant chord, a subtle warning that something was fundamentally wrong. My mind, trained to identify and solve complex business problems, began to flag these inconsistencies. But my heart, deeply invested in my marriage, resisted the implications. To suspect Isabella, the woman I had built my life with, felt like a betrayal of my own values. I'd spend late nights poring over spreadsheets, cross-referencing figures, trying to find a logical explanation that didn't involve malice. Was I becoming paranoid? Was the stress of running a large company finally getting to me? The self-doubt was a heavy cloak, weighing down my judgment. I prided myself on my rationality, my ability to separate emotion from business decisions. Yet, here I was, caught in a swirling vortex of suspicion and denial. I tried to talk to Isabella, to express my concerns about the business's cash flow, hoping she would shed light on the issues. She'd listen patiently, her brow furrowed, offering suggestions for cost-cutting or new revenue streams, always deflecting any direct inquiry about the specific discrepancies. Her evasiveness, subtle as it was, only deepened the unease. I wanted to believe her, to dismiss my fears as unfounded. But the numbers, cold and impartial, told a different story. They whispered of a leak, a steady drain on our resources, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the source was closer than I dared to imagine. And then there was Leo Maxwell. Isabella had met him at a charity art auction a few months prior. He was a struggling artist, as she'd affectionately called him, with a brooding intensity and a penchant for abstract sculptures. Isabella, always drawn to the unconventional, had taken him under her wing, commissioning pieces for our home, introducing him to her social circle. I found him pretentious, his art incomprehensible, but I indulged Isabella. Happy wife, happy life, right? He was often at our house, ostensibly discussing commissions or artistic concepts with Isabella. I'd see them in the study, doors slightly ajar, his low voice murmuring, her tinkling laughter. I dismissed it as her latest philanthropic obsession. He was a drain on her time, I thought, but harmless. He always looked a little too disheveled, a little too hungry for someone supposedly supported by a wealthy patron. The contrast between his bohemian lifestyle and our structured world was stark. I never imagined, not for a second, that this struggling artist was anything more than a fleeting interest, a project for Isabella to nurture. The bitter truth, the one that would later curdle my stomach, was that he was not just a fleeting interest. He was a black hole, sucking away my hard-earned capital piece by agonizing piece. The breaking point came with the quarterly tax report. Our accountant, a meticulous man named Arthur, called me directly, his voice tight with concern. "Mark," he said, "there's a significant discrepancy in the outgoing transfers. Several large sums flagged as miscellaneous expenses that don't have corresponding invoices or clear beneficiaries. It's unusual." Unusual was an understatement. This wasn't a minor oversight. This was a gaping hole in our finances. My rational mind, finally unshackled from emotional bias, took over. I thanked Arthur, assuring him I'd look into it. But instead of confronting Isabella, I made a decision that felt both necessary and profoundly painful. I contacted a forensic accountant, a discreet professional known for untangling complex financial webs. His name was David Miller. Meeting him felt like admitting defeat, like acknowledging the rot at the core of my life. But the need for truth, for concrete, undeniable proof, outweighed my discomfort. I needed to know the full extent of the damage. I gave him full access to all our business and personal accounts, every ledger, every transaction. I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. I was about to confirm my worst fears, or perhaps, just perhaps, finally understand the true nature of the enemy within. I was no longer just a businessman. I was a detective, and the stakes were everything. David Miller worked quickly, silently, a financial ghost. A week later, he called me into his office. The air was heavy with unspoken truths. He laid out a series of documents, each one a fresh stab to my gut. The miscellaneous expenses weren't miscellaneous at all. They were direct transfers, large sums, funneled into an account under Leo Maxwell's name. There were also numerous smaller transactions, disguised as art purchases, but far exceeding the value of any art he could possibly produce. And then, the final, crushing blow. A series of hotel bills, luxury restaurant receipts, and high-end jewelry purchases, all paid from our joint business account, all occurring during periods when Isabella claimed to be at art retreats or charity galas. The dates, the locations, the amounts, they all aligned perfectly with Leo's known whereabouts. My world, the one I had so carefully constructed, imploded. It wasn't just an affair, it was a systematic, calculated theft. My wife, the woman I trusted with my life, with my business, was siphoning funds to support her secret lover. The betrayal was a physical blow, leaving me breathless. The anger was a cold, hard stone in my chest. This wasn't just about a broken marriage, it was about a broken trust, a desecration of everything I had worked for, everything I believed in. The numbers didn't lie. Isabella's deceit was laid bare, undeniable, irrefutable, and the scale of it, the sheer audacity, was staggering. I stared at the documents, the cold, hard proof of her treachery, and felt a profound emptiness. The woman I loved was a stranger, a thief, and a liar. As I absorbed the devastating financial reports, David Miller pointed to a series of unusually large, one-time transfers. "These," he said, tapping a line item, "don't fit the pattern of regular support for Mr. Maxwell. They're too large, too sporadic." He then showed me a corresponding withdrawal from one of our corporate investment accounts, an account that required dual signatures. My signature was clearly forged. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about supporting a lover. This was something far more serious, something that touched the very core of my business's legal and financial integrity. The forged signature hinted at a level of premeditation, a depth of criminal intent that went beyond a simple affair. It suggested a larger, more dangerous game at play, one that could expose me, my company, to legal repercussions I hadn't even considered. The affair, the embezzlement, they were just symptoms. The real disease, the true, chilling secret, was still lurking in the shadows, hinting at a conspiracy far more complex and perilous than I could have ever imagined. The financial ruin wasn't just a threat, it was a weapon, and I was just beginning to understand who was truly wielding it. The revelation hit me like a physical blow, leaving me breathless and disoriented. The numbers, cold and irrefutable, painted a picture of betrayal far more intricate and devastating than I could have ever imagined. It wasn't just a broken heart, it was a broken business, a shattered legacy. The initial shock gave way to a profound numbness, a protective layer that shielded me from the full weight of Isabella's treachery. I continued to move through my days, a phantom in my own life, attending meetings, signing documents, all while a silent war raged within me. Every interaction with Isabella became a performance, a carefully choreographed dance of normalcy. Her smiles, her casual touches, her inquiries about my day, each felt like a fresh insult, a cruel reminder of her duplicity. The worst part was the silence. The silence of her deceit, so loud it echoed in my ears, and the silence of my own pain, which I couldn't share with anyone. I wanted to rage, to confront her, to demand answers. But the businessman in me, the one who always calculated the risks and rewards, knew that an emotional outburst would only serve to complicate matters, to give her an advantage. No, this required precision, a surgical approach to dismantling her carefully constructed web of lies. My pain began to morph into a cold, calculated resolve. This wasn't about vengeance in the heat of the moment. It was about justice, about reclaiming what was rightfully mine, both financially and emotionally. My business acumen, honed over 2 decades, became my greatest weapon. I instructed David Miller, my forensic accountant, to delve deeper, to leave no stone unturned. I wanted every single transaction, every hidden account, every forged signature brought to light. This wasn't just about proving an affair, it was about exposing a criminal enterprise. I became a silent observer, a ghost in my own home, watching Isabella's every move, listening to her every word, searching for any slip, any tell. The financial documents, once a source of pride, became a roadmap to her betrayal. I learned to read between the lines, to spot the patterns of deception, to anticipate her next move. It was a morbid education, a masterclass in financial fraud, and I was its unwilling student. Each new piece of evidence, each confirmation of her systematic theft, chipped away at the last vestiges of my love for Isabella, replacing it with a steely determination. I wasn't just a wronged husband. I was a victim of a calculated, prolonged financial assault, and she and her lover would pay dearly. The evidence accumulated rapidly, a damning chronicle of their financial malfeasance. David Miller uncovered a series of shell corporations, ostensibly legitimate businesses, but in reality, mere conduits for siphoning funds from Donovan Enterprises. There were fraudulent invoices for services never rendered, inflated expenses for phantom projects, and a complex web of offshore accounts designed to obscure the money trail. Isabella's signature, once a symbol of trust, now appeared on documents authorizing massive, unauthorized transfers. We found evidence of luxury purchases, designer clothes, exotic vacations, even a down payment on a lavish apartment. All for Leo, all paid for with my company's money. There was one particularly galling discovery, a series of payments to a high-end art gallery, ostensibly for Leo's exhibitions, but the amounts far exceeded any reasonable commission. It was clear they were laundering money through the art world, using Leo's struggling artist persona as a convenient cover. The casual cruelty of their actions, the utter disregard for the years I had poured into building my business, fueled my resolve. This wasn't just a few $1,000s, it was millions. Millions siphoned away, threatening to bankrupt the very company I had dedicated my life to. They were not just lovers, they were co-conspirators, partners in a sophisticated scheme to defraud me. The financial drain began to manifest in tangible ways. Projects were delayed, key investments put on hold, and the company's cash reserves dwindled at an alarming rate. I had to lay off a small number of employees, a decision that tore at my conscience, knowing their livelihoods were being sacrificed for Isabella's greed. My reputation, once unblemished, felt vulnerable. I avoided industry events, fearing that any hint of financial instability would send shockwaves through the market. The stress was immense, a constant pressure that threatened to crack my composure. I spent sleepless nights, haunted by the numbers, by the looming threat of bankruptcy. My focus at work suffered, my decisions clouded by the emotional turmoil. I couldn't confide in my business partners, fearing the damage it would do to the company's image. So I suffered in silence, a prisoner in my own financial labyrinth, haunted by the specter of ruin. The vibrant, confident entrepreneur I once was began to fade, replaced by a hollowed-out version, consumed by a silent battle for survival. But within that hollowness, a new strength began to forge itself, a cold, hard resilience. I was no longer just a victim. I was a strategist, a silent warrior, preparing for a battle that would determine not just my financial future, but my very identity. The initial desire for a screaming match, for a dramatic confrontation, had long since faded. It was replaced by something far more potent, a hunger for absolute justice. What would an emotional outburst achieve? A momentary satisfaction, perhaps, but it wouldn't recover the stolen funds, nor would it dismantle their carefully constructed criminal enterprise. No, their punishment had to fit the crime. It had to be public, undeniable, and utterly devastating to their carefully cultivated images. I wanted them to feel the same financial ruin, the same public humiliation, the same profound loss that they had inflicted upon me. My retribution wouldn't be impulsive. It would be a masterpiece of calculated legal and financial precision. I envisioned the courtroom, the judge, the lawyers, the cold, hard facts laid bare. The thought of Isabella's face, contorted in shock and shame, became my driving force. It wasn't about anger anymore. It was about surgical precision. Every piece of evidence, every forged document, every illicit transfer would be woven into a narrative of their undoing. I would not just expose their affair and embezzlement. I would expose their true characters, their utter lack of ethics, their profound criminality. This wasn't just about me. It was about setting a precedent. A warning to anyone who dared to play with another's trust, especially when that trust involved millions. The best revenge, they say, is living well. But sometimes, the best revenge is also ensuring that those who wronged you can no longer live at all, at least not in the lavish, ill-gotten way they envisioned. I started to subtly test them, to see if they would crack under the slightest pressure. One evening, at dinner, I casually mentioned a new, aggressive internal audit I was initiating at Donovan Enterprises, citing unexplained discrepancies. Isabella's hand, reaching for her wine glass, trembled almost imperceptibly. Leo, who was present, choked on his food. They exchanged a quick, almost imperceptible glance. It was enough. Another time, I accidentally left a printout of a suspicious bank statement on my desk, face up, knowing Isabella would clean my office. I watched from the corner of my eye as she paused, her eyes scanning the document, before quickly flipping it over and feigning disinterest. Her hurried movements, her forced casualness, were neon signs flashing their guilt. These small tests confirmed what David Miller's reports already showed. They were deeply entrenched in their deception, and they were terrified of being caught. Their fear, their paranoia, became a perverse source of strength for me. I was in control. They just didn't know it yet. Each test, each confirmation, solidified my plan, adding another layer of ice to my resolve. They were walking into a trap, and I was the one setting it, piece by agonizing piece. The forged signature on the corporate investment account continued to gnaw at me. It wasn't just a one-off. David Miller found other instances, smaller ones, but still unauthorized. It suggested a pattern, a systematic attempt to gain control over my company's assets, not just siphon them. And then he uncovered a series of communications between Isabella, Leo, and a third party, a shell company registered in a tax haven. A company with no discernible business operations, but with significant capital. The communications were coded, but the frequency and the amounts discussed suggested a much larger, more organized operation. This wasn't just about Isabella supporting her lover. It was about a coordinated effort to destabilize Donovan Enterprises, perhaps even to facilitate a hostile takeover. The affair, I realized with a chilling certainty, might just be a convenient smokescreen, a distraction. While I was consumed by their personal betrayal and the financial siphoning, they were orchestrating something far more ambitious, something that could completely dismantle my life's work. The thought sent a shiver down my spine. This wasn't just about a broken marriage. It was about a corporate conspiracy, a calculated attack on my entire empire. The pieces were starting to connect, forming a picture far more sinister than I could have ever imagined. The financial ruin wasn't just a consequence. It was a deliberate objective. and I was just beginning to understand the true architects behind it. The day I filed for divorce was not one of triumph, but of grim necessity. The papers, thick with legal jargon and damning financial exhibits, were served to Isabella at our home, a place that once symbolized our union, now a monument to her deceit. Her initial reaction was a theatrical display of shock and indignation. "Mark, what is this? Are you mad? This is insane," she shrieked, her voice laced with a practiced blend of hurt and outrage. She tried to play the victim, the wronged wife, but her performance was hollow, lacking the genuine emotion that had once captivated me. Leo, who was, of course, present, hovered nervously in the background, his artistic facade crumbling under the weight of impending reality. Isabella's attempts at manipulation were immediate and desperate. She tried to appeal to my sense of loyalty, our shared history, even our supposed love. She threatened to expose my own business dealings, to ruin my reputation, unaware that I had already meticulously prepared for every possible counterattack. Her lawyers, initially confident, quickly shifted their tone as David Miller's comprehensive reports began to surface. The sheer volume and irrefutability of the evidence left no room for denial. The game was up, but Isabella, blinded by her own hubris and greed, refused to see it. She believed her charm, her connections, her ability to twist narratives would somehow prevail. She was about to learn that numbers, unlike emotions, do not lie. The courtroom was a sterile, unforgiving arena, a stark contrast to the opulent world Isabella had grown accustomed to. Every detail of her betrayal, every siphoned dollar, every forged signature was laid bare under the harsh fluorescent lights. I sat beside my legal team, a silent observer, my composure unwavering. Isabella, on the other hand, was a picture of unraveling composure. Her carefully constructed facade began to crack under the relentless onslaught of facts. My lead attorney, a formidable woman named Miss Davies, presented David Miller's findings with surgical precision. Charts, graphs, and transaction logs flashed across the large screens, each one a nail in Isabella's coffin. The judge, a stern, no-nonsense figure, listened intently, his expression unreadable. Isabella's lawyers tried to discredit the evidence, to paint me as a vengeful husband, but their arguments withered under the weight of the irrefutable data. I watched Isabella's face, once so expressive, now a mask of dawning horror. Her eyes darted between the screens, the judge and me, a flicker of desperation replacing her earlier indignation. Leo, called as a witness, stammered and contradicted himself, his artistic temperament ill-suited for the brutal honesty of a courtroom. He looked like a deer caught in headlights, his carefully cultivated mystique evaporating with each nervous glance at Isabella. The air was thick with the truth, undeniable and suffocating. This wasn't just a divorce. It was a public dissection of their deceit, a brutal reckoning for their financial crimes. The verdict was swift and decisive. The judge, citing the overwhelming evidence of financial malfeasance, granted me full control of all joint assets, including the business. Isabella was left with nothing but the clothes on her back and a mountain of debt incurred through her lavish spending and Leo's artistic endeavors. But the legal consequences didn't end there. Based on the forensic accountant's report and the evidence presented, the judge also ordered a full criminal investigation into Isabella's embezzlement and the fraudulent activities involving the shell corporations. The news spread like wildfire. The local media, always hungry for a scandal involving the city's elite, picked up the story. Donovan Empire rocked by wife's embezzlement, read one headline. Socialite Isabella Donovan faces criminal charges, screamed another. Her carefully curated image as a philanthropist and socialite shattered into a million pieces. The social circles she had so meticulously cultivated turned their backs. Invitations stopped coming. Phone calls went unanswered. The whispers, once confined to the courtroom, now echoed through every exclusive club and charity gala she had once graced. Leo, too, found himself in the crosshairs, his art career, such as it was, irrevocably tainted by his association with the scandal. His gallery exhibitions were canceled, his commissions dried up. The public humiliation was absolute, a fitting consequence for their calculated greed. They had sought to ruin me financially. Instead, they had ruined themselves, legally, financially, and socially. I heard about Leo's abandonment from a mutual acquaintance, a small, almost insignificant detail in the grand scheme of things, but one that brought a grim satisfaction. He had apparently shown up at Isabella's temporary apartment, demanding money, furious that his patron was now penniless and facing criminal charges. When she couldn't provide it, he had a spectacular meltdown, accusing her of ruining his life, of being a gold digger who had led him astray. The irony was almost comical. He, the struggling artist who had happily lived off my stolen funds, now blamed her for his own downfall. He packed his meager belongings, leaving her alone in the wreckage of her life, a testament to the transactional nature of their relationship. He hadn't loved her. He had loved the lifestyle she provided, the lavish gifts, the illusion of success. Once the money dried up, so did his affection. He was a parasite, and when the host was no longer viable, he simply moved on. Isabella, who had once boasted about her artistic soulmate, was left with nothing but the cold, hard reality of her situation. Abandoned, disgraced, and facing a very bleak future. The poetic justice of it was not lost on me. He had gained nothing but a financially ruined partner, and in his selfish abandonment, he sealed her fate. The immediate aftermath of the verdict was a whirlwind of activity. My legal team worked tirelessly to secure all assets, to untangle the complex financial web Isabella had woven. The forensic accountant, David Miller, became an invaluable ally, his expertise crucial in recovering what had been stolen. The employees at Donovan Enterprises, who had been quietly aware of the financial strain, breathed a collective sigh of relief. Morale, which had plummeted during the uncertainty, began to rebound. I held a company-wide meeting, explaining the situation with transparency and honesty, assuring them that the crisis was averted and that we were stronger than ever. The support I received from my genuine friends and family was overwhelming. They had stood by me, silently observing, offering comfort and strength when I needed it most. There were no "I told you so's," just quiet understanding and unwavering loyalty. The house, once a symbol of our shared life, was now truly mine, cleansed of the deceit that had permeated its walls. I began the process of redecorating, of transforming it into a space that reflected my renewed sense of self, free from the shadows of betrayal. The legal battle was over, but the rebuilding had just begun. And this time, I was building on a foundation of truth, not lies. As David Miller and I meticulously reviewed the final reports, tying up loose ends, he pointed out a recurring name in the shell company transactions. Not Isabella's, not Leo's, but a third party, a holding company I vaguely recognized from an old, almost forgotten business deal years ago. This company, David explained, has been involved in several hostile takeovers of tech firms in the past decade. They specialize in destabilizing companies from within, often using financial irregularities and internal conflicts as leverage. My blood ran cold. The forged signatures, the systematic siphoning of funds, the deliberate creation of financial chaos, it wasn't just about Isabella's greed or her affair. It was a calculated, sophisticated attack on Donovan Enterprises. Isabella and Leo were pawns, unwitting or otherwise, in a much larger game. The affair, the embezzlement, the public scandal, it had all been a meticulously orchestrated distraction designed to weaken my company, to make it vulnerable for a hostile takeover. The true enemy wasn't just my cheating wife. It was a shadowy corporate entity, pulling the strings from behind the scenes. The financial ruin wasn't just a consequence of her actions. It was a deliberate objective, and I had been too consumed by the personal betrayal to see the larger picture. The anger I felt towards Isabella and Leo was now tinged with a chilling realization. I had won the battle, but the war, the real war, had just begun. And this time, the stakes were not just my marriage, but my entire empire. The legal battle concluded, leaving Isabella with crippling debt and the looming threat of criminal prosecution. Leo, true to his parasitic nature, vanished, leaving her to face the consequences alone. The news of her embezzlement and the subsequent criminal investigation spread like wildfire, ensuring her social and professional ostracization. For me, the immediate aftermath was a whirlwind of activity, a necessary cleansing. My legal team, with David Miller's invaluable assistance, meticulously untangled the complex financial web Isabella had woven. Every penny siphoned, every fraudulent transaction was traced and accounted for. The process was exhaustive, but vital. We recovered a significant portion of the stolen funds, enough to stabilize Donovan Enterprises and mitigate the damage. The company, which had teetered on the brink of financial ruin, began its slow, steady recovery. I held a series of meetings with my executive team, transparently outlining the challenges we had faced and the steps we were taking to secure our future. Their loyalty and dedication, even in the face of adversity, was a powerful testament to the culture we had built. The employees, who had endured the uncertainty with quiet resilience, responded with renewed vigor. Morale, once fragile, solidified into a shared determination to rebuild. The estate, once a symbol of our shared life, was now solely mine, purged of the deceit that had permeated its walls. I began the process of transforming it, not just physically, but energetically, into a space that reflected my renewed sense of purpose, free from the shadows of betrayal. The legal victory was a crucial first step, but the true work of rebuilding, of healing, had just begun. Healing, I discovered, was not a destination, but a continuous journey. The emotional scars of betrayal ran deep, but I was determined not to let them define my future. I sought professional help, engaging with a therapist who guided me through the labyrinth of grief, anger, and shattered trust. It was a difficult, often painful process, but essential for true recovery. I reconnected with old friends, those who had stood by me, offering unwavering support without judgment. I rediscovered passions I had long neglected, finding solace in long hikes in the mountains, the quiet contemplation of nature, and the challenge of learning a new language. My work, once a source of immense pressure, became a canvas for my renewed focus and creativity. I poured my energy into innovative projects, expanding Donovan Enterprises into new markets, embracing technologies that had once seemed too risky. The company thrived, not just recovering, but surpassing its previous successes. I learned to trust my instincts again, that quiet voice within that had tried to warn me. I prioritized my well-being, understanding that true strength came not just from financial success, but from inner peace and resilience. The weight of the past began to lift, replaced by a newfound lightness, a sense of liberation. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. The best revenge, I realized, wasn't just about their downfall. It was about my ascent. It was about proving to myself and to the world that I was more than just a wronged husband. I was Mark Donovan, architect of my own destiny, stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever before. The financial ruin they had intended for me had, ironically, become the catalyst for my greatest growth. The unsettling discovery. As Donovan Enterprises soared to new heights, I remained vigilant, my senses sharpened by the past betrayal. David Miller, my forensic accountant, continued to monitor the financial landscape, particularly the activities of the shadowy holding company we had identified. One afternoon, he called me, his voice grave. "Mark," he said, "I've found something. The holding company, Aegis Solutions, has just acquired a controlling interest in one of our key competitors. And the CEO of Aegis Solutions, it's a name you'll recognize." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Who?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Richard Thorne," David replied. The name hit me like a physical blow. Richard Thorne. My former mentor, the man who had taught me everything I knew about business, the man I had once considered a second father. He had retired years ago, seemingly disappearing from the corporate world. But now, he was back, at the helm of a company known for its ruthless, predatory tactics. The pieces clicked into place with a horrifying precision. The forged signatures, the systematic siphoning of funds, the deliberate creation of financial chaos within Donovan Enterprises. It wasn't just Isabella's greed or her affair. It was a meticulously orchestrated corporate raid designed to weaken my company, to make it vulnerable for a hostile takeover. Isabella and Leo were not just pawns. They were unwitting, or perhaps willing, instruments in Thorne's grand scheme. The affair, the embezzlement, the public scandal, it had all been a brilliantly executed distraction, designed to consume my attention while Thorne's company systematically dismantled my empire from within. He had used my personal life, my emotional vulnerability, as a weapon against me. The depth of his betrayal, far exceeding Isabella's, was staggering. He hadn't just taught me how to build, he had taught me how to be destroyed. And he had used his own lessons against me. The financial ruin wasn't just a consequence of Isabella's actions. It was a deliberate objective, a carefully planned corporate assassination, and I had been too consumed by the personal betrayal to see the true enemy. Suddenly, every seemingly innocuous detail, every fleeting moment of unease coalesced into a terrifyingly clear picture. Thorne's subtle inquiries about my business's internal financial systems during our occasional mentor-mentee lunches. His seemingly innocent questions about Isabella's role in our finances. The way he had always encouraged my focus on the big picture, subtly discouraging me from delving into the granular details of our accounts. The consulting fees Isabella had vaguely mentioned? They were payments to Thorne's network, disguised as legitimate business expenses. The large one-time transfers David Miller had flagged? They were the initial capital injections into the shell corporations, setting the stage for the systematic siphoning. The forged signature on the corporate investment account? That was Thorne's hand, a master manipulator covering his tracks. He had been grooming Isabella, subtly influencing her, perhaps even orchestrating her introduction to Leo, knowing her weaknesses, her desires for a more exciting life. The affair was a brilliant diversion, a perfectly crafted illusion to keep me distracted while he executed his corporate coup. He had played me, my wife, and her lover like puppets on a string, all for the ultimate prize, Donovan Enterprises. My initial triumph over Isabella felt hollow, replaced by a cold, simmering rage at Thorne's audacity, his manipulative genius. He hadn't just taught me how to build, he had taught me how to be destroyed, and he had used his own lessons against me. But now, I had the knowledge. I had the true blueprint of his destruction, and this time, my retribution would be far more devastating, far more permanent. The game wasn't over. It had just entered a new, far more dangerous phase. I sat in my office, the city lights twinkling below, a stark contrast to the darkness that had just been revealed. The ledger Thorne's name now etched into its pages felt heavy in my hands. They thought they had won. They thought they had gotten away with it. But they had underestimated me. They had underestimated the architect, and they had forgotten one crucial detail. I always finish what I start, and some secrets, once unearthed, refuse to stay buried. They fester, they twist, and they will always find their way back to the surface. Because the real game, the one they never saw coming, has only just begun. And this time, there will be no escape. Not for them. Not for anyone involved. The blueprint for their destruction is now complete, and I'm ready to build. But this time, I'm building a trap. And Thorne, my old mentor, is about to learn that the student has surpassed the master, and the cost of his lesson will be everything.